Hello and welcome to the podcast. So in this case, we're dealing with the Lonnie Zamora incident, or also as I've named it, the Socorro case. So it's quite interesting, this one. And in terms of the content of the podcast in comparison to the video, it's got all the full narration from the video in. There is a little bit at the end which I feel why this can't be from a combustible fuel source, whatever this craft was. That has got to be something else. Okay, so as an extra note, the extra content is starts at around the 37-minute mark. About 2 minutes after this is where I go into why I put forward my strongest argument, I feel, of why this isn't a traditional method of propulsion for this craft. And then around the 42.5 to 43-minute mark, that's where I also put forward a perspective of what I think actually happened, given everything that I've looked into on this. So, okay. Another thing just to note as well, apologies, I've not been maintaining the podcast as well as what I have previously. I've been a bit busy, but it's quieting down a little bit. So going forward, I should be able to maintain the podcast a little bit better. So enjoy and thanks for listening. Like and subscribe and comment as well. So in 1964, a respected police officer reported an egg-shaped craft that had landed in the New Mexico desert. It came down, there's flames behind it, it landed. Then he went to investigate this, and as he did, some things strange happened. At first he thought it was a vehicle. He saw two figures outside this craft. He then approached the craft. There was some flames there. It took off and then silently flew away into the desert over the mountains behind. This was a respected police officer. And just so happens when he phoned this in at this police station, there was an FBI officer present at this police station. And he went with several of the police officers to investigate this. And they found burn marks. They found landing impressions. And decades later, we're looking at this incident. I think this is a very credible UFO case. You've got such credible witnesses to this. You've got impressions, you've got diagrams, you've even got measurements and the depth of the impressions. Like and subscribe and comment. Be great to know what you think about this video. I have generated some of my AI content again in this one. I think it's a bit better. I've probably gone a bit over the top with the AI content. But at the end, I'll put it in as the full video. Perhaps I might put it somewhere else. I don't know. I haven't done the editing, but I quite like it. Just have to state it is AI. It's not real. They've done it. The AI's done a pretty good job in it. There are some inconsistencies in it, like cars randomly moving or something. But it's a bit of fun. I will release the podcast. I know I've released my other videos have released a concise version, a long version. I think I'm just going to go out and just put the longer version out there, to be honest with you, as opposed to uploading two. Might get a bit confusing, two different uploads kind of thing. So I'll just do this. And then I generally, the following Monday, that's when I'll release the podcast. Okay, so here we go with the account. Now, this is kind of a bit broken because he wanted to get down as much information accurately as whilst it was fresh in his mind, is what I'm assuming. So I will chuck in a few filler words there, but it'll be accurate to the account. There are any things because he's very brief in certain statements, and I think to make it flow better and sound better, I'll add these in. So, Special Agent D. Arthur Burns, Jr., Federal Bureau of Investigation, stationed at Albuquerque, New Mexico, was at Socorro, New Mexico, and at the state police office there on business late afternoon, April 24th, 1964. At approximately 5:45 to 5:30 p.m., Nep Lopez, radio operator in the Socorro County Sheriff's Office, which was located about 30 feet down the hall from the state police office, came into the state police office. Mr. Lopez advised M.S. Chavez of the New Mexico State Police that he had just received a radio call from Officer Lonnie Zamora to come to an area about 1 mile southwest of Socorro. The call was in relation to some unknown object which landed and has taken off. Agent Burns finished his work in the State Police Office at Socorro at approximately 6 p.m, April 24th, 1964, and thereafter proceeded to the site where Officer Zamora and also Socorro County Undersheriff Jim Lockie, Sergeant M.S. Chavez, and Officer Ted Jordan were assembled. So you've got the three extra police officers from the state police office, and then the FBI agent attending as well, and that's in addition to obviously the eyewitness of Zamora. It may be noted that it's been the observation of Agent Burns that Officer Zamora, known intimately for approximately 5 years, is well regarded as a sober, industrious and conscientious officer and not given to fantasy. So we can see here that, again, reputable eyewitness. You've got a police officer of good standing giving an eyewitness account. Officer Zamora was noted to be perfectly sober and somewhat agitated over his experience. Special Agent Burns noted 4 indentations in the rough ground at the site of the object described by Officer Zamora. These depressions appeared regular in shape, approximately 16 by 6 inches rectangular. Each depression seemed to have been made by an object going into the earth at an angle from a centre line. Each depression was approximately 2 inches deep and pushed some earth to the far side. So obviously it has kind of come in at a bit of an angle there. It's not landed vertically by the sounds of this. It's almost vertically, but slightly to one side. Inside the depressions were 3 burned patches of clumps of grass. Other clumps of grass in the same area appeared not to be disturbed. One burnt area was outside the 4 depressions. There were 3 circular marks in the earth which were smooth, approximately 4 inches in diameter, and penetrated into the sandy earth approximately 1/8 of an inch, as if a jam jar lid had gently been pushed into the sand. No other person was noted in the area the night of April 24th, 1964. No other objects were noted in the area possibly connected with the incident related by Officer Zamora. So far as could be noted, there were no houses or inhabited dwellings in the area or in sight of the area. And now here we go to the account from Officer Lonnie Zamora. Okay, so he states his name, address, unit number, phone number. We don't need to know that kind of details. He was on shift from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. on the 24th, 1964 of April. About 5:45 p.m. April 24th, 1964, while on Socorro 2 police car, which was a 1964 Pontiac White, Zamora started to chase a car due south from west side of Courthouse. The car was apparently speeding, and it was about 3 blocks in front of him at point of Old Rodeo Street, an extension of Park Street South near George Murillo residence, about 1/2 mile south of Spring Street. The chased car was going straight ahead towards rodeo grounds. Car chase was a black Chevrolet. It might have been Floyd Reynolds' boy, Vivian, about age 17. The chase car was still about 3 blocks ahead. Lonnie alone is noted, so obviously he's solo on this. At this time, heard a roar and saw a flame in the sky to the southwest, some distance away, possibly a 1/2 mile or a mile. Came to mind that a dynamite shack in that area had blown up, so he decided to abandon the chase and to check out the flame. The flame was a bluish and sort of orange colour. Could not tell the size of the flame, sort of motionless flame, slowly descending, was still driving the police car and could not pay too much attention to the flame. It was a narrow type of flame. It was like a stream down, a funnel type, narrower at the top than at the bottom. The flame possibly 3 degrees or so in width, not wide. Flame was possibly a mile south of Socorro in an isolated area. The flame about twice as wide at the bottom as the top, and about 4 times as high as the top was wide. Did not notice any object at the top, did not know if top of the flame was level. Sun was to the west and did not help vision. Had green sunglasses over prescription lenses, over prescription glasses. Could not see the bottom of the flame because it was behind the hill. No smoke noted. Noted some commotion at the bottom, dust ? Possibly from windy day. Wind was blowing hard. Clear sunny day otherwise, just a few clouds scattered over the area. The noise was a roar, not a blast, not like a jet. Changed from high frequency to low frequency, then stopped. The roar lasted possibly 10 seconds, was going towards it at the time on the rough gravel road. Saw a flame about as long as heard the sound. The flame colour, as best as recall, so again the blue-orange flame. Sound distinctly from high to low until disappeared. Both car windows were down, no other spectators noted, no traffic except the car in front, and the car in front might have heard it but possibly did not see it because the car in front was too close to the hill in front to see the flame. After the roar and flame, did not note anything while going up the somewhat steep hill toward the flame site. Got about halfway first time, wheels started skidding, roar still going on, had to back down and try twice again before we made it up the hill. Hill about 60 feet long, fairly steep with a loose gravel and rock. While beginning the third time, noise and flame not noted. After got to the top, travelled slowly on the gravel road westwardly, noted nothing for a while, for possibly 10 or 15 seconds, went slow, looking around for the dynamite shack, did not recall exactly where the dynamite shack was. Suddenly noted a shiny type object to the south, about 150 to 200 yards. It was off the road. At first glance, stopped. It looked at first like a car turned upside down. Thought some kids might have turned over. Saw two people in white coveralls very close to the object. One of these persons seemed to turn and look straight at my car and seemed startled, seemed to quickly jump somewhat. When I first saw the object, when I thought it might be a car, I saw what appeared to be two legs of some type from the object to the ground. At the time, I didn't pay too much attention to what it was. I thought it was an accident. I saw the two persons. I didn't pay attention to the two legs. The two legs were at the bottom of the object, slanted outward toward the ground. The object might have been about 3.5 feet from the ground at that time. I just glanced at it. At this time, I started moving my car towards them quickly with the idea to help. I had stopped only about a couple of seconds. Object was like aluminum. It was a whitish against the mesa background, but not chrome. It seemed like an oval in shape, and I at first glance took it to be an overturned white car. Car appeared turned up, like standing on the radiator or the trunk at this first glance. The only time I saw these two persons was when I had stopped for possibly 2 seconds or so to glance at the object. I don't recall noting any particular shape or possibly any hats or headgear. These persons appeared normal in shape, but possibly they were small adults or large kids. Then paid attention to the road while drove towards the scene. Radio to the sheriff's office, Socorro to Socorro, possibly a 1044, which is an accident. I'll be 106, busy, out of the car while checking the car down the area. Stopped the car, was still talking on the radio, started to get out, the mic fell down, reached back to put up the mic, then replaced the radio mic in the slot, got out the car and turned to go down to where he knew the object or car was. As the mic fell, I got out the car at the scene area. I heard about 2 or 3 loud thumps, like someone possibly hammering or shutting a door or doors hard. These thumps were possibly a second or less apart. This was just before the roar. The persons were not seen when I got up to the area. Hardly turned around from the car when I heard the roar. Was not exactly a blast, a very loud roar. At that close was real loud. Not like a jet, and it stated he knows what a jet sounds like. Started low frequency quickly, then roar rose in frequency, higher tone, and in loudness from loud to very loud. At the same time as the roar, saw a flame. The flame was under the object. Object was starting to go straight up, slowly up. Object slowly rose straight up. Flame was a light blue at the bottom and was sort of orange in colour. From this angle, saw what might be the side of the object, not the end as first noted. Difficult to describe flame. Thought from the roar it might blow up. Flame might have come from the underside of the object at the middle, possibly a 4-foot area, a very rough guess. Cannot describe flame further except blue and orange. No smoke except dust in immediate area. As soon as saw the flame, heard the roar, turned away, ran away from object, but did turn head several times toward the object. Bumped his leg on the car, the back fender area. The car was facing southwest. His glasses fell to the ground. He left them there, ran to the north with the car between him and the object. The object was oval in shape. It was smooth, no windows or doors. As roar started, it was still on or near the ground. Noted red lettering of some type like insignia sketch. The insignia was about 2.5 feet high and about 2 feet wide. Guess was in the middle of the object, like the insignia sketch, which I'll put on the screen. Object still like aluminum white. After fell by the car and glasses fell off, kept running to the north with the car between me and the object. Glanced back a couple of times, noted object to rise to about level of the car, and this was about 20 to 25 feet, as a guess. And he says it took about 6 seconds when the object started to rise, between it rising and him glancing back. I ran, I guess, about halfway to where I ducked down, which was about 50 feet from the car, just over the edge of a hill. I guess I had run about 25 feet when he glanced back and saw the object about level with the car, and it appeared about directly over the place where it rose from. I was still running and I jumped just over the hill. I stopped because I did not hear the roar. I was scared of the roar and I had planned to continue running down the hill. I turned around toward the object and at the same time put my head towards the ground, covering my face with my arms. Being that there was no roar, I looked up and saw the object going away from me in a southwest direction. When the roar stopped, I heard a sharp tone whine from high tone to a low tone. At the end of the roar was this whine, and the whine lasted maybe a second. Then there was a complete silence about the object. That's when I lifted my head and I saw the object going away from me. It did not come any closer to me. It appeared to go in a straight line at the same height, possibly 10 to 15 feet from the ground, and it cleared the dynamite shack by about 3 feet. The shack's noted as being about 8 feet high. The object was travelling very fast. It seemed to rise up and take off immediately across country. I ran back to my car, and as I ran back, I kept an eye on the object, picked up my glasses, I left my sunglasses on the ground, got into the car and radioed to Nep Lopez, radio operator, to look out the window to see if you could see an object. He asked, "What is it?" I answered, "It looks like a balloon." I don't know if he saw it. Then it's noted, if Nep looks out of his window, which faces north, he couldn't have seen it. I did not tell him to at that moment which window to look out of. As I was calling Nep, I could still see the object. The object seemed to lift up slowly and to get smaller in the distance very fast. It seemed to just clear the Box Canyon or 6 Mile Canyon mountain. It disappeared as it went over the mountain. It had no flame whatsoever, and it was traveling over the ground and no smoke or noise. I can't tell how long I saw the object the second time, the close time, possibly 20 seconds, just as a guess. And that's from the time he got out of the car, glanced at the object, ran away from the object, jumped over the hill, then got back to the car and radioed as the object disappeared. Just before Sergeant Chavez got to the scene, I got my pen and drew a picture of the insignia of the object, which we can see on the screen now. Feeling in good health, his last drink was 2 or 3 beers, which was over a month ago. Noted no odours, noted no sounds other than the ones described. Gave directions to Nep Lopez at the radio and to Sergeant MS Chavez to get there. Went down to where the object had been, and I noted the brush was burning in several places. At the time, I heard Sergeant Chavez, New Mexico State Police at Socorro, calling me on the radio from my location. I returned to my car and I told him. He was looking at me. Then Sergeant Chavez came up and asked me what the trouble was, because I was sweating, and he told me I was white, very pale. I asked the sergeant to see what I saw, and that was the burning bush. Then Sergeant Chavez and I went back to the spot, and Sergeant Chavez pointed out the tracks. Okay, so I think the best thing to do here is, because I'm trying to figure out how to pick out the anomalies on this, I think maybe if we go through the account and look at this in order, and then we'll kind of address some of these. So initially, you can see the statement of the flame whilst it's descending in the sky, and to me, this sounds like with this craft, there's something wrong with this craft, that it's malfunctioning, it's descended. Especially when he says he hears a roar and saw the flames in the sky to the southwest, some distance away. But if the flame is there then, and we recall later on that it wasn't there whenever it took off and flew away. I mean, when it took off, it might have been there a little bit, but then when it flew away, there was no flame. You can assume that something's obviously happened to this craft, that there is a malfunction with this, and that's hence why there was a bit of an emergency landing here. And I know what some people will probably say and say, like, you know, if this is some sort of non-human intelligence or something like this, like a true UFO, then why would the craft be behaving like this. Surely they have better machinery or something. Look, we're saying that these are advanced species or something along those lines. We're not saying they're infallible or perfect. Things that we've mastered for years in our society, we still get wrong. Cars, we've had cars since 1886. They still break down. The design changes, there's faults with them. We've had the wheel for 5,000 years and we still can't stop wheels from wearing out. Engineering in terms of stuff like this, whenever there's some sort of mechanism where there's energy and friction and all sorts of things, that we don't know how this works realistically. But, when there's any sort of mechanism like this, there likely will be wear and tear on it. It's just the nature of materials. All right, that might be a bit less. And I suppose from our opinion, we would expect more of an advanced civilization. But again, we're talking about an advanced civilization, not a perfect civilization, in the hypothetical scenario that these non-human intelligence. In the fact that if these are our own, and this is very strange if it is, because the technology timeline, which I'll go into at the end, but the technology timeline of this sort of mechanism for propulsion, this was in 1964. We only had the atom bomb not long before this. It was 18 years prior to this, 18, 19 years. So to go from that to that extreme so quickly for this propulsionless travel is insanely fast. So also it is noted as well that there was a sound. So he heard the roar. Obviously that could be described by some sort of thing, the flame itself anyway. Whenever there's a fire in the sky, that kind of thing. If there's some sort of problem with the craft, that could be described. But it was noted that he said it changed frequency from a high frequency to a low frequency, then stopped. Now, if we assume some sort of electromagnetic propulsion on this or something along those lines, it's some, we say about like some sort of oscillation or something within the craft or some sort of mechanism. When things go, you would assume it starts it would be at a high frequency in flight, and then it would wind down to a low frequency when the oscillation slowed down and the craft stops. So that aligns with something being slowly wound down to a stop. And it says that the roar lasted possibly 10 seconds and he was heading towards it. So you've got 10 seconds of this object winding down its motion. And I think if we look into this as well, you could kind of get a grasp of how this craft might operate. And this is another point with all these accounts that mention these crafts and even the videos and stuff. We could probably assume how some of these things operate by certain accounts like this, because those frequency sounds, they're quite, you could say they're kind of unique to certain mechanisms. So that wind down from low to high, that really sounds like some sort of oscillation of a mechanism within that craft that's slowly stopping. So they're turning off the engines of this thing. And he said it was also stated he saw the flame as long as he heard the sound. So obviously, again, this goes back to the malfunction sort of theory that essentially there was a malfunction on the craft, and whilst this craft was running, it was causing some sort of friction, heat, dispersion, which is ignited and caused a flame within the system. And further to this, he said when it was taking off, he saw these flames again. Again, if this has caught fire and they've had to emergency quickly leave because someone was there coming directly towards them, and they've had to leave and just hope that it works itself out. Perhaps shutting it down has helped that, and then they take off again. He said it went from a low frequency to a high frequency, which is again aligns with that kind of ignition of whatever the propulsion mechanism is, of winding back up to generate the propulsion. And the flames underneath are probably, I'm assuming, and I'll show you some of the screenshots of the sketches here, and we can get a lot from this. But it seems to be that it looked like it was possibly in one of the landing gears from where the flames were. And so we can see here the sketches, and here you can see the 4 rectangles are obviously the legs that's come down. There's a burn mark on each one of these, and the footprints are located in this area of the craft. And if you notice, these are all, and they've done pretty good analysis, like the angles 90 degrees like that, and then this one sticks out slightly. And if we scroll down to the next image, you can see again underneath, so they've documented where the landing legs are, and again this one sticks out, and you've got a burn mark in these locations, one burn mark underneath, and then another two, and then one over this way. And again, this location here, hopefully you can see the mouse, was where the footprints were located. And you can see that this landing leg sticks out dramatically from the others, and it's in the same location as the burn marks. So for me, that would state there could be some sort of problem with the landing gear, or the landing legs on this thing. And the thumps, and he said he heard 3 thumps when the craft took off. Now, the 3 thumps could be the 3 working landing gears that he heard going back up inside the craft. And he did note as well the flame might have come from the underside of the object at the middle, possibly a 4-foot area, as a very rough guess. So I think from certain perspectives, it's hard to kind of say on this, because if he was aligned at a certain angle, he would have seen this as the middle when it probably wasn't the middle. It could be slightly off center. It all depends on his approach to the craft, especially with it being oval shaped. It's harder to determine this. And the thing that also kind of conforms to this is the fact that the craft, when it was flying away, it had no flame, it had no sound. Apart from that, it lifted off and then it flew away with no propulsion system. He said there was no odors as well. So again, if there was any sort of fuel combustion source on this, then you would have, there might have been traces of that smell on there. Even things like mechanical wires and stuff like that, you probably would have had that smell after. So clearly this is some sort of propulsion system. Maybe there's some friction that's been generated and it's caused this to malfunction. The other thing which is quite of note is the burnt vegetation as well, about the thermal effects, kind of thing like that. The exposure to heat was very localized. So by default, then this means the ignition system would have been very localized as well. If this was some sort of thermal, if this was some sort of combustible fuel source for a vertical launch, it wouldn't be this localized. It would be directly underneath, and it would spread outwards, and the brush around it would have been had some sort of burning as well, and there'd be a lot more burn marks than what was noted. So I think, again, that goes to say that it sounds like, for me from this report, it seems more like there was some sort of malfunction with this craft in one of the landing gears, specifically at point 4. And this is where the footprints were. The people were observed there, like observing this aircraft, the landing legs in turn synchronized going up, the 3 that were working, and then this took to flight and maintained the standard sort of what we consider like the normal sort of UFO motion of, he said it was very fast, silent, and the rest of it. Also, on a further note, in relation to the sketch and the imprints, I done a calculation based on the soil type in Socorro, New Mexico, and so it gives a clear measurement of how deep each of these triangular imprints were, the sizes of them. So I calculated this would mean that the whole craft would probably have to be between 2 to 8 tons. This craft weighs. Further to this, to propel a craft this size to make it hover and then shoot off in the distance, you're talking it would need at least probably about a ton of propellant to do this maneuver. So given that we know that this is an estimate from the soil type and everything, that this is about a 2 to 8 ton craft, and that there must, for this one maneuver to be about a 1 ton worth of fuel combustion, you've got 2 passengers on board, then also the engineering and mechanics and everything included in this craft. I don't think that this is, obviously it's not combustible fuel that's propelled this craft. And again, it goes back to that pitch of noise. And a further note as well is that it stayed low. So for me, they didn't have flames when it was going away, but it had flames when it came down. So to me, this kind of says that the intensity of the internal engine, perhaps it's done in oscillations or something like that, to reduce this kind of friction or any sort of error within this craft, it might have had to stay low so it wouldn't catch fire again, and to have this malfunction on the craft, which says that there's a direct relation here to the engineering mechanism and the height and altitude that it flies at. Almost like faster or more rotations of whatever's causing this whine would increase the altitude in which this craft flies. A bit like how certain propellers work. So essentially, I think the revolutions per minute would also be a direct correlation of the altitude of this. And if they've had a malfunction on this sort of craft, they're obviously keeping those revolutions down as low as possible to stop this kind of this breaching this threshold, which is causing a malfunction. Okay, so let's move on to the shape of the craft, because this is quite interesting as well. It's oval shaped, which is not a standard UFO flying saucer shape, especially for that period of time. So, I mean, obviously I've used AI to generate the picture of this with the insignia on as well, and I've included the two figures in there, which we'll go on to in a minute. But does this shape, does it look familiar? You know, if we remember back to that video, the UFO retrieval via a tether, I think it was a Black Hawk helicopter, of the egg shaped and also the egg shaped pod in the photos apparently as well. And again, let's assume the total skeptic perspective on this and that this was a hoax. Reports of these egg shaped craft aren't in isolation, for a start. I know what I'm about to say does detract from verifiable evidence and crosses into a second person telling, but I do know with someone who was incredibly reliable, let's just say, that has seen one of these objects flying above their head, and it was about 20 feet above their head, 40 foot in size. And again, this is strange because that aligns with when I've done the Tic Tac UFO videos, they stated it was about that size as well. And they had two other witnesses with them who both saw the same thing. And I get this doesn't make it conclusive in terms of sort of any evidence, because it's like it's a second person telling. And frankly, it shouldn't really be taken into account for me either, because it's someone saying to me and it's not first-hand account, although I do have my own personal first-hand account of such encounters, which maybe I'll go into sometime, but I'm trying to leave that kind of slightly impartial, and even bringing this in does kind of make it slightly impartial as well. But this is why I like to take testimony into account for such things like these, because of my own experience and other people as well. I've detracted from the main point though. The egg-shaped UFOs aren't new, and it's also these reports do continue, so they haven't changed shape in all these years. From the 60s, and this account I'm saying was in the 60s as well. These haven't changed shape. So I feel if this was some sort of human technology, then perhaps this shape wouldn't be so consistent. I mean, we upgrade cars, as I say, so frequently, and there's different shapes. Even planes like change shape. When we're inventing new things, they constantly evolve and they do things, but this doesn't seem to. It seems to be fairly static. Like this shape is consistent. Humans are tinkerers by nature, and I think this is what brings me to kind of another abnormality, is how consistent these objects are from the 60s right up to the present time. It raises the brow, as it were. So another quite interesting point is the insignia on the object. It's very strange. What's with that insignia on the object? I've tried to research this and it doesn't match anything. There's no symbol, nothing. And the nearest thing is actually the Greek letter alpha. But this is, a very remote connection to it, really. And I actually find this stranger. Like, there's nothing that connects to this symbol. I mean, surely even by chance we'd have a few connections with this kind of symbol. I did think perhaps maybe the symbol, the redness on the lines or something, maybe that was some sort of doorway on the object, and perhaps it was slightly ajar or something like that, and then when it closes over, that's why it... So also with the beings near the craft, these were described as kids or short adults with white coveralls, but no other description. I'll say the obvious that we're all thinking, are these alien greys? But surely you would have noted some features of these, though, the slightly larger head, different skin complexion or something. The observation of these were at a distance. So what was this a true ratio, a true representation of their size? And this is another option. Perhaps they were normal size or even tall, and some perspective ambiguity actually made them appear short. I mean, you with an abnormal object, the kind of egg, everything like that. Did that make them appear to look short? They didn't raise too many alarm bells with Zamora, so did they look human? And now I go to sci-fi mode again. Sorry for the uber rationals that's watching this, but I think it's fun to explore such an angle as well. You know, if we are dealing with these hypothetical things, you've got to take old accounts and different things into consideration. And I think it's also quite fun to explore these kind of concepts. They're all in white, and nothing that immediately kind of seems alien. Are they similar to the Nordic alien types? Or is there no perspective ambiguity and these are just short people? It's a shame that nothing more was kind of noted about these, as I feel this is a key detail. But does the fact that there was no more information about these, nothing raised alarm bells, does that actually support a more humanly kind of black research type explanation for this? Would that sort of silent propulsion be possible a mere 19 years after the atomic bomb? 19 years to develop this technology from the end of World War II. It does seem fairly quick technological jump, but is it unreasonable? And why have the shape of these craft not changed in so many years? I mean, it would defy our understanding of certain physics in 2026 for a craft that's 62 years old. So that's quite strange. And that's why I kind of lean towards this more. I don't know if this could reasonably be said it was a black project. Again, that time frame, 19 years after the physics that it defies 62 years ago, even relative to modern physics. Just one more note really is more circumstantial. So the witness and investigators are incredibly reliable and skilled, you know, and it was, you know, why aren't there any photos attached to this? This was a well documented incident with FBI agents, no under police officers. There were even secondary reports, accounts that photos were taken. Where are they of these imprints of the craft? Why aren't these released with the other files? Is that something you would include in such a report, in some sort of research and the documentation around this phenomena? It's a theme I've noticed with these files. You can look at the underlying data and note that there are numerous pieces of information that are missing. Files that jump, for example, from a section 9 file to a section 130 file, then to section 153. What's in all these missing files in between that, and will we ever get them? What do you think about this case? You know, write in the comments, let me know. If you have enough time, give me a like and a subscribe whilst you're down there also. Write in the comment. It really does help to keep the channel active, and it helps my enthusiasm in producing this stuff and keeps that alive. Just those extra few affirmations, I suppose, that, you know, people, I suppose, are enjoying these videos. And also it helps like spread these videos to other people as well, so that more people can kind of get involved in the subject, and hopefully looking at this from a certain perspective, breaking these down like analytically and kind of looking into these kind of things, you know, will help the subject massively. Okay, so a few things to know. This is basically, the first thing is around the weight calculation. Now I calculated based on the depth, but I failed to incorporate any downward propulsion as well that could have impacted and may have skewed it slightly. So it's probably actually light on the lighter side. I think I stayed between 2 and 8 tons. So I'm going to say roughly more like 2 to 5 ton in weight. So just as an extra, I can't remember if I mentioned it entirely in the video, but the weight I calculated using the soil type in this area, the depth of the imprints as well, and also looked at the weather conditions around this time to find out, you know, how dry it was, all that kind of thing. So just as a bit of background information, that's how I calculated it. Further to this, I did do an estimate of the amount of energy required, and for a 5-ton estimate, I think for it to hover for 10 seconds and travel in each direction, the arrival for 1 minute and the departure for 1 minute, it would need approximately about 200 to 300 kilograms of fuel. But the problem here is that's just the assumption that it's 1 minute either way. Not to mention that the craft, when it was in motion, there was total silence and no visual propulsion whilst in flight. And then you also got to incorporate other things like stability issues, therefore increasing the energy consumption, because obviously there's lack of the aerodynamics from wings and from the tail of a craft, which, you know, fighter jets and things like that use that as basically a bit of lift, and it reduces the energy consumption. The most intensive maneuver, just say hypothetically with the jet, would be the direct vertical hover, whereas a craft moving in this motion would have to maintain that hover whilst also doing any other like horizontal movement or propulsion along with that as well. And further to this, even when you think about the silence that's involved, a jump jet in hover is about 140 decibels. this was silent. So again, that's very strange. So there's a few things that really lead me to conclude that this wasn't propelled by combustible fuel, and I think the most obvious one for me is Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So to generate the lift of about 2 to 5 tons vertically upwards, so don't forget the thrust would also be directly vertically down, but it would probably go out as well, fly out either side. Then any of the footprints. You probably can't. You obviously can't see the diagram in the podcast, but there are footprints on the mapping of where they've basically drawn the distances between the legs, the location of the footprints, location of the burn marks, that kind of thing. Those footprints would not be visible if there was a vertical liftoff from propulsion. So whilst there were flames there, it's also of note as well, the flames were there when it was on the ground and it wasn't in motion. That also, I feel for me, implies as well that there was something, probably a malfunction within this craft. If the flames were there when it wasn't in motion at all, it was landed and the pilots that were inside were outside of the craft, then, and it still had flames as reported by Lonnie Zamora, then the landing with the flames and the takeoff with the flames, I think, is almost, it's not relevant to the propulsion system when the rest of the flight had no flames and silence. So, and again, reiterating the third law, Newton's third law, those footprints would have been wiped away. A shallow footprint off right underneath, directly underneath a vertical takeoff propelled by propulsion, they wouldn't exist. It would be questionable if the landing prints would even still exist or still be visible after a vertical takeoff like that. There were other comments as well about perhaps it was from the NASA. There was a NASA base, not like you say, not far. It was 100 odd miles away. But the thing is, as well, that's not. It doesn't have a runway. It doesn't have a takeoff area. It's all entirely visible from the road, the entire base. So, in terms of secretive technology, what they do there, and I've looked into this, it seems to be more they test the component parts before it's assembled elsewhere, like direct components of whatever their research interest is in that base, and hence the reason why everything's kind of in buildings and secure, and yet from the road, which is a public access road, you can literally see right into the base and see everything. I don't think they'll be testing some advanced technology there in plain open sight of anyone from the road. It's just not viable. Further to this was investigated by the FBI, and I'm assuming quite a few of the three-letter agencies, and not one statement has come out from NASA to say, look, this was a test flight. Further to this, there's a lot of military that work within NASA, which I've pointed out on some of the other podcasts, and I'm fairly certain that there would be some sort of insider sort of comment to someone else saying, look, this was one of ours, and it wouldn't have been added to these files as like a unresolved incident. So I don't think that's really viable. And I think, again, reiterating, repeating here, a NASA test site with full visibility from the road, I don't think it's the sort of place that would test this technology. There's numerous things I've looked into with this, and a lot of it I haven't actually included because it's a lot of research that I do on this. It takes a good few days to kind of research all these topics, and I think from my opinion, for whatever it's worth to whoever, I think for me it seems to be some craft with an alternative method of propulsion that's had some sort of malfunction. It's landed. The pilots, whoever they may be, have gotten out of the craft. They've tried to fix the problem. They've obviously Lonnie Zamora stumbled across them. They've gone back in, or they've seen someone coming over the hill or something, and then they've gone back into the craft. And those three bangs with the legs going back up, it took to flight. So I think the loud roar that Lonnie Zamora heard and the flames from a distance, that can be explained. When you think about this logically, if there was a malfunction within the craft, and this is an airtight container type craft, and they've dropped the landing legs, that will create a backdraft whereby the flames will be exposed to a different pressure environment and almost be sucked out of the craft and create that roar and that massive flame plume that he saw. That didn't he noted that there wasn't any smoke with it. Again, that would also go along with the theory that this could have been caused by a backdraft from a pressured environment being unsealed. So, and when the craft took off again and flew away, obviously the legs retract, everything goes in. It recreates that pressure seal in the craft, and so the flames are contained within that, and that malfunction, obviously they only flew a certain height as well, which is very interesting. They only flew, I think it was 3 feet above the dynamite shack. So this is the other thing, perhaps the altitude is in relation, I think I mentioned this in the video, perhaps the altitude is in relation to the amount of stress on the propulsion system, whereby they're having to maintain a lower altitude so as not to overpower the system essentially. But further to that is an emergency case. If they did crash, they're only going to crash that 13 feet or so, as opposed to if they were higher up and something quite bad happened and obviously extra stress on the engine, that would be a different story. So again, because it's quite strange, that low altitude flight, that hovering flying away at that low altitude, a lot of these that we hear of are a lot higher in altitude than this, so there must have been a reason for that. And I think again this kind of points towards that idea that there's probably a malfunction with the craft. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I am releasing something slightly a bit different. I'm doing a news podcast once a week, and I will be releasing it. It's only going to be 20 minutes or so, depending on the episode and what's covered in it. This week's episode was actually on the current disclosures, where senators, religious pastors, and even scientists have slightly changed their opinions on things and have mentioned about briefings or like skiff meetings about this topic specifically. But going forward, the news podcast will feature a range of different topics, perhaps going into, I think there's one that I want to look into for the week after next week, which is recent information around the pyramids, that kind of thing, various different topics. But the aim is to actually see what's verified, what's plausible, to filter out some of the noise, as it were, because there's a lot of information out there, and sometimes I think it's hard to say, this is what the actual situation is. There's a lot of sensationalized claims on either side. It's more to be from a neutral perspective, whereby I can just present the verified information to you, and so people can make up their own conclusions about things. But the thing is, there's a lot of noise out there. And I think we need something to say, look, what are the facts around this? What's verifiable? What's plausible? Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe, comment. See you next time.